What's going on, everybody, and welcome back once again. My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. I want to thank you guys for joining me for another army creation video. Now, as I promised last time, today we're going to be taking a look at the Kingdom of Gondor, which I know is a fan favorite of many of you out there. So without any further ado, let's jump right into it. Now, let's start this video by talking a little bit about some of the changes that's going to be coming for Gondor down the pipe in the upcoming stat balancing hotfix, which this will be coming out on a Friday. From what I understand, Kuro is actually working on something in particular, and the rest of the team is working on doing some other model tweaks and stuff like that as well. So it will probably be coming out tomorrow on Saturday instead of Friday. Yeah, I know it sucks. You guys are probably really excited about it, but it's going to be worth it. I guarantee you. So let's talk a little bit about some of the changes that Gondor is going to be seeing in this patch. Now, first and most important is that Gondor Cavalry is now limited to 2, and there's a very good reason for this. I've also gone up in price a little bit from 600 to 625, but that's because they are now Spear Cavalry, and they can be upgraded quite heavily to be some very, very deadly, cost-efficient Spear Cavalry. Now, once fully upgraded, they cost about 750, which is the former cost of the Penrith Galen Cavalry. Now, speaking of the Penrith Galen Cavalry, they've actually gone down in price ever so slightly by 25 from 750 to 725. They are still 50 men in the unit, and there's a couple of reasons for why I didn't, bring them up to, say, 60 men in a unit and drop their price to 700. A big concern of mine when conceiving of some of these changes, especially the Spear Cavalry change for Gondor, is that Gondor's cavalry would end up being really, really strong. And then factions like Dol Amroth, well, probably not Dol Amroth because they have a lot of melee cavalry, but a faction like their sister, Arthedain, who specializes more in their cavalry and in some of their Dunedain units, would be overshadowed by this new addition. So for that reason, the Penrith Galen Cavalry only got a slight price decrease, and the Gondor Cavalry have gone down to 2 before the price increase instead of 3. I mean, 3 of them, it was really, really strong, and even with like 2 of them right now, using them as support, they are very, very good, and they are an excellent addition to Gondor's roster, which will hopefully make them a little bit more capable in a cap-to-cap fight without, again, overshadowing factions like Arthedain or even Dol Amroth, who specialize more in cavalry, and in the case of Dol Amroth, in cap-to-cap fighting. So yeah, it's a nice little middle ground here, a nice cost-efficient answer to a lot of units. These guys can actually stand up really well to wargs as well, which is a big boon for Gondor and allows some of their other cavalry to kind of do their job, and opens up the possibility of cavalry-heavy builds for Gondor. Now, most of the time we want factions to focus and play to their strengths, but we also want there to be the option to do something creative and have that creative build be viable, which is really at the heart of my challenge video series and stuff like that, just trying to kind of expand the possibilities of what's done in the meta. But in any case, there you go, a couple of changes that are coming to Gondor in the upcoming patch. There's a few other things like price. The Gondor spearmen, I think, have gone down a little bit. The Axemen of Lasarnak are going to be having a new intermediate armor model, which is taken from DAC. So you're going to see the unit here, the bald, kind of homeless-looking guys with their big beards, are going to be the first upgrade, and then there are 2 subsequent upgrades as well, which make the Axemen of Lasarnak look really cool, which honestly makes me want to take them more. The fact that they look that cool and they look more appropriate in the Gondor roster really makes me want to incorporate them into more builds, so that's kind of neat. But in case, let's talk a little bit about Gondor's strengths as a faction. Now, UMAG Commander has actually released a Gondor faction video that deals a little bit more in detail with stats and things like that, and Gondor as a whole. But yeah, so if you guys are interested in a different kind of take on this that's not focused on army creation, then I recommend you guys go and check that out. But in any case, as he says in his video, they are very much focused around outlasting their opponents. A lot of their units get a malice, a -1 attack and melee defense debuff if they are not a spear unit. So the swords, for example, they are only at 5 because of this debuff. And there is a buff that Gondor units get, just to kind of add to the defensive nature of the faction, where they get a +1 attack and melee defense buff if they are wielding a shield, which the buff and the debuff cancel each other out and keep the Gondor sword units fairly stable, like middling, but not amazing. But their spear units end up being a little bit stronger. So if there's other factions like Arthedain, for example, who have equivalent spear units that are a little bit more expensive and don't do as much damage as the Gondor spear units. So Gondor is a little bit more efficient in terms of their spearmen than other very easily comparable factions like, say, Arthedain or Dol Amroth even. Dol Amroth has to pay quite a lot of money, I believe, to get a 4 damage spear and shield unit, 700 instead of the 575 that Gondor pays. So they really specialize in that kind of defensive style of warfare. One of the big shortcomings of Gondor is that they don't have halberds, unlike a lot of other factions out there, like Umbar or Dol Amroth, or even Cardalin. They do not have a ton of halberds, but they compensate for this a little bit by their elite units being armor-piercing, their elite spear units specifically. So the Fountain Guard, the Citadel Guard, and the Nimlothian Honor Guard are all armor-piercing. So I think that makes a good place to kind of start off for our army creation. So let's kind of exemplify and really take advantage of Gondor's more defensive nature here by taking a lot of these AP spears, and that's going to be our second line. Our front line going to be composed of relatively fewer Gondor infantry, and this is just because they can get quite expensive when you upgrade them, but they also get much more efficient. So an upgraded line like this is actually quite strong, and you don't need to take them in, at least in my opinion, in as many numbers, and that leaves you a little bit more funds to diversify. So a couple units of Ramasek or Garrison Archers, again, very efficient, very tanky, not a lot of damage behind them as they are a militia archer, and they've only got, I believe, 18 ammo to the 20 that the Gondor archers can bring to the table. What they do have is decent armor and a shield value, which is extremely important for archer units to have in a skirmish fight. It's going to help them stay alive for a lot longer. So these guys are not really so much about damage, but a little bit more like the Umbar archers in that they are great for outlasting your opponent, making them use up their resources trying to deal with this obnoxious little thorn in their side. Because while 4 damage is not huge, it is enough to be a threat to a lot of units in the game, and even 1 damage arrows have a chance to kill 12 armor knights and stuff like that, or to shave off a bit of HP. So your enemy will definitely go for these guys, I would say most of the time, because they are a threat. Yeah, with how tanky and they are in their numbers and etc. So let's see there. Let's move on. Well, we've got a lot of AP on the line. We could bring some Pelagir Marines, but I think a little bit of extra skirmishing power is a good thing to have. And let's focus now on some of that cavalry. I really want to try. Well, let's stick with the 1 armor upgrade for now, but I really want to try and bring a lot of their cavalry to bear. So that's a fairly balanced cavalry force right here. Very balanced Gondor army in general. And I would put my general in the Nimlothian Honor Guard, to be honest. And there you go. You have a balanced cavalry force, one that's got a little bit more punch behind it. And since we've got enough resources here, we might as well upgrade some of our Gondor units who can take it, which makes them very, very good indeed. Now, as I'm sure many of you are aware, but in the event that you're not, armor upgrades, they give actually, in effect, 2 points of armor instead of just 1. So these units, instead of being at 9 armor, are going to be at 11, which is pretty significant. So let's give that to as many units as possible. And then let's see here. Let's give a little bit of damage to the... Well, let's give it to the Fountain Guard. They would definitely appreciate that. So all in all, it ends up being a fairly balanced force. It's got a little... Its biggest kind of shortcoming is that it doesn't have a ton of skirmish power. I mean, you've only got 3 units of archers, but what it does have is the Ramasek or Garrison Archers, who are useful for, as I said, using up your enemy's ammunition pools and just generally being a pain in their butt. And when it comes down to an infantry fight, you're going to be pretty well suited to do a lot of damage to your opponent, even with your relatively limited resources. Only 3 Gondor infantry and 2 Gondor spearmen, but all these elites in the back here, and of course the Nimlothian Honor Guard, who are absolute beasts in melee, make it a pretty deadly army indeed if you're facing down an opponent that is very heavy on their armor. So against this armor, I think, would be okay if you were fighting against, say, Khazad-dûm, for example. Although if you are fighting against Khazad-dûm, maybe it would be a little bit more worth it for you to stick with the 2 units of Ramsek or Garrison Archers instead, and try and outlast the Khazad Orc Hunters, and go with the unit of Pelargir Marines. If you're playing against Erebor, I think this would also be a decent army to have, and against Erebor I would definitely take the Pelargir Marines because of how well armored those Dwarven units tend to be, and the crossbows in particular. I mean, you're going to be taking the skirmishers usually to try and deal with enemy skirmishers against a Dwarven army, so yeah, your Ramsek or Garrison Archers and really anything on the Gondor lineup is not able to really put a dent in the Ironfoot crossbows because of how armored they are and their high shield value. So I would take the Pelargir Marines over another unit of archers in that instance. But let's move on. Let's try and do something a little bit different. Now, actually, one of the things I forgot to talk about was that the Caer Andros, actually human swordmasters in general, have all basically dropped down to about 800, and they've got a little bit of extra damage as well. One of the things that was brought to my attention a few times by people in the community, and after some testing and some thinking about it, I do actually agree with them, is that the swordmasters were not really efficient. They were as expensive as elven ones, but they simply weren't as good and didn't really compensate for that enough with their slightly higher numbers. So in the instance of making the Swordmaster units a little bit better and a little bit more worth it, their price has basically gone down by 50 across the board, and they've got a little bit extra damage as well. So they're now well situated, a nice little medium between the power and skill of the Elven units with a little bit more numbers, and kind of the mass-produce approach to the Orcish factions, like what are they called? The Black Uruks of Moria, for example, now stack up a little bit better against the Swordmasters, as they do tend to win often because of their numbers, which is really what Orcish factions happen to be about. But in any case, let's try and incorporate the Swordmasters into a viable Gondorian army. Now let's focus a little bit more on swords this time around than spears, and maybe we'll take some of the Axemen of Losarnik as well, because they just look so damned cool that I don't want to ignore them. Now, archers. We've got our elite picks here, so I don't think it would be a good idea to add something like the Veterans of Osgiliath, and we've already got the Inspire from the Wardens of the White Tower, so the Veterans of Osgiliath would be, I think, a little bit redundant in this instance. So let's go again with the Ramsek or Garrison Archers, and let's see here. Well, let's keep an opponent in mind. Let's say we're going to be playing against Orcish factions, and they're going to have a reasonable amount. They tend to have a fair amount of fear effects on a lot of numbers, and usually some nasty AP units mixed in there as well. So we're going to need some things that are capable of thinning the herd. So I think a unit of Athelian Rangers would probably not go amiss in this kind of army. What's the word I'm looking for? Production, composition, that's the one. Brainy XE stopped working for a moment there. And we're going to need a solid front line, so a little bit more from the Gondor infantry that time around. A couple units there of the Guards of Osgiliath to make themselves a little bit more useful. Now, if we're fighting against the Orcs, they're probably going to have Orcs. So let's take a couple units of Cavalry there to try and ward them off. Let's see here. I would even pay for another one, just to make it ourselves a little bit more obnoxious. And I don't think in this instance we're going to try and win a cavalry fight. I think that because of the more defensive nature of Gondor and how efficient their units can be, it is actually a viable tactic to try and grind your opponent down in a prolonged melee. So I think what we're going to need is, it might be some spearmen. So how much money do we have left? We have 760. So maybe to assist the cavalry, but no. And instead of that, let's focus a bit more on infantry, and we'll go for some more numbers there. Ramsek or Garrison they're not horrible, and we can make them a little bit more viable with some extra attack upgrades. Now, normally I would give those upgrades to some higher tier units, like the Caer Andros Swordmaster or the Axemen of Losarnik, but I think that they've got enough damage to overwhelm the relatively lower melee defense and armor values of the Orcs, and I'm honestly not against giving attack upgrades to lower tier units, because it does make them a lot more efficient, and the Ramsek or Garrison are already pretty cheap, and there's a lot of them, so this makes them a little bit nicer and a little bit better able to stand up to some of the very cost-efficient infantry that the Orcs can bring. So these guys are kind of like human goblins in a way, with their 4 damage, but they're fairly high amounts of armor and stuff like that. They can make a really strong tar pit. So there you have it. Another I would say, reasonably balanced Gondor army with a little bit more focus on the infantry and some of their stronger shock units and stuff like that. That's all about kind of trying to grind your enemy down in close quarters. So the pikes, working in tandem with the gunner infantry, do that nicely, and supported by the axemen of Sarnak and the Garandor swordmasters, and of course the wardens of the White Tower, who are nasty. That's definitely a possibility. Now let's think a little bit more about Gondor in, say, a defensive siege, which is something that seems to happen a lot. People like to play Gondor on like Minas Tirith and stuff like that. So let's think something a little bit. Let's think about something a little bit more along those lines. So Nimlothian Honor Guard, you can have them represent Denethor's bodyguard or his Citadel Guard or something like that. And a couple units Phantom Guard, because they are so nasty. A lot of melee skill there and a lot of damage as well. And of course it is AP. So there you go, that's going to be our elite picks. Rangers, very useful in siege. I would also take a company of Pelargir Marines. I wouldn't go for both because I think it's overkill and does get quite expensive. And you've got a couple units here that can kind of fulfill the same role of killing a whole lot of units really, really quickly. So I think these two supporting each other quite well, and it kind of fills our needs there of burst damage. So we're going to go with one unit of Pelargir Marines. Let's see what else we want here. I would say pikes. Pikes are a really strong thing to have in a siege, and we're going to need at least 3 companies of fully upgraded Gondor infantry. Because we want it, it's Minas Tirith, we want it to be like a sexy cinematic siege, and also the Gondor infantry paired with the Guards of Osgiliath are really, really strong, and just generally when they're upgraded like this, they can do really, really well for themselves and punch. Not hugely above their pay grade, but they can definitely reach up there a little bit. Let's see. Another good addition, I would say, will be a couple units of Axemen of Sarnak, a little bit of extra AP there. Not too much. We're trying to kind of spread ourselves out across the roster and allow ourselves to counter a fair amount of threats while still having units that work well together once the kind of grindy defensive choke point fighting of a siege really starts to set in. So a couple units of Ramesek or Garrison Archers are going to be important as well. Although in a defensive siege it might even be worth it to go for the Gondor Archers and their higher missile damage, because your enemy's attention is probably going to be elsewhere. So we'll take a couple units there of the Gondor Archers, which is definitely a good thing to have. And that gives us a total of 3 bow units, which we're not going to focus too heavily on the bowmen for this, because personally in sieges, I never do them alone. So you're always going to have a teammate there that you can kind of rely on and lean on a little bit. Sometimes you're going to have multiple teammates. So really, I do go a little bit more balanced. Well, I usually make balanced armies, but I tend to balance my forces in the manner that you're seeing here, just because I have that option of an ally and things like that. But let's see. What else? Well, we could dump it into some Cavalry swordmasters, but that kind of gets rid of our funds really quickly, and numbers in a siege are also a really important thing. So let's go. Let's see here. A little bit more numbers, and I believe that the Ramesek or Garrison can be upgraded, so we'll upgrade them a little bit. Add a little bit of like a militia to your kind of front line that's we can use aggressively. Sometimes it is nice to have units that can move quickly like this to or they don't move particularly quickly, but to have units that you don't mind losing, that you can like quickly throw into opportunities to catch enemy skirmishers and stuff like that. So the Ramesek or Garrison can be very useful in that regard. So I wouldn't mind taking just a couple of them. And let's see, what else does that leave us with? We've got about 1,800 or so funds, so we can no longer get. Oh no, we can get 2 units there of the Cavalry swordmasters, which adds a little bit of oomph to our infantry line. And then we've got a fair amount here left over for upgrades as well, which I don't even know if we'll be able to use all of that. But let's go ahead and let's try. Oh yeah, we can totally use all of that. Although maybe, instead of more armor, the Axemen of Sarnak, it would be a bit more prudent to upgrade some of our elite units. And let's see here. I'm going to give these guys a little bit of extra damage as well. So a lot of damage here, a lot of cost-effective infantry like the Gondor infantry and the Guards of Osgiliath. Just generally a lot of quality, but it's also fairly balanced, and it enables you to really present a threat to your enemy on multiple fronts. I mean, with the Pelargir Marines, javelins are always something that people are afraid to run up against in a siege, so They will spend a lot of time focusing a unit of Pelargian Marines, which is also another reason to only bring one of them, and to just kind of use them. If you can get volleys off of them, then they can be devastating, but you can also use them to draw attention from other things, like your Athelian Rangers, for example, who are definitely going to come under fire. So if you engage both of these at the same time, depending on who you're fighting and what their composition is, you potentially force your enemy to choose between basically getting slapped in the face or punched in the stomach. The Athelian Rangers can do a lot of damage, and so can the Pelargian Marines and choke points. So yeah, it's a good thing to think about as well. Kind of, you know, maybe trading up a pawn for a knight or something like that. But yeah, in any case, let's move on to something a little bit more off meta. Why don't we try a Gondor cavalry army? I spoke about that a little bit earlier, but let's see what that would look like, and maybe explore the viability of Gondor as a cavalry faction. So there you go, 5 units of cavalry as Gondor, which is nigh unheard of. Most people don't really have a ton of respect for Gondor cavalry. Hopefully this new patch changes that somewhat. But we'll have a couple units in there of the Ramessic or Garrison Archers, and I think since this is so cavalry heavy, this might end up being a bit of a rush army. So let's have a couple units there, some nasty AP units with some nice upgrades, and maybe we will go for 2 Pelargian Marines in this instance. Now we're gonna need something that can tar pit and just generally be a bit of an irritant. So if we want to go for numbers, we could go with the Ramessic or Garrison. Now they do have about 2 lower morale than the Gondor infantry, which does lead them to being much more susceptible to routing. So if you're fighting against trolls or things that can do a lot of damage really quickly and also cause fear, only certain trolls cause fear anymore, but most trolls can do a lot of damage really quickly, then maybe the Ramessic or Garrison won't be the best idea. But if you think that you can hold them together, then do this. 425, they're there you go, they're 125 cheaper than your Gondor infantry, so you can bring a lot of them for reasonably cheap. Toss a unit of Shielded Fountain Guard in there as well, and you are golden. That leaves you enough left over for a couple companies of the Carandra Swordmaster. So a very shock-heavy army here, one that's going to be very offensive and a little bit more cost-efficient on the main line, but some of their more specialist troops, like the Carandra Swordmasters and the Axemen of Sarnak, and the Pelargian Marines can do a lot of damage really quickly. And then, of course, you've got a ton of cavalry that your opponent is going to have to deal with, and a little bit of missile support as well, which definitely does pose a big threat. I wonder if these guys can be upgraded twice. No, they cannot. So let's see here. I think that we could upgrade the Axemen of Sarnak even further and make them very nasty shock troops indeed. A couple more attack upgrades there for our infantry, and let's see. We could give one to the Gandalf's Retinue Bodyguard, or we could give it to the Nimlothian Honor Guard, who are AP, so I think the damage will go a little bit farther there for them. So there you have it, a bit of a Gondor rush army, and you know, I'm actually gonna screenshot that, and maybe we'll use that as one of our challenge armies. But maybe with a few additions, but in any case. So I think that really kind of does it for at least a few Gondor armies. Let me just kind of summarize Gondor as a faction a little bit once more for you guys before we sign off. They are a little bit less offensively oriented, although as you have seen, they do have offensive tools at their disposal that they can use in certain situations. They can even create their own kind of rush build. And now with the addition of some cavalry, one of Gondor's traditional weaknesses, that being that they have only lancers and nothing that can really answer other factions cav to cav. Now that gap is being filled, I think we should see them being a little bit more powerful in the field. In defensive sieges, Gondor has been, and I think will continue to be, very, very strong. And they have the potential to be a really big pain in the butt, which is a nice flavor for a faction like Gondor to have. I mean, they are the bulwark of the West that stands against like Mordor in the darkness and prevents the kind of softer lands west of them, like the Shire and Lindon and the Greyhavens, from being overrun by the evil in Middle-earth. So the fact that they are a little bit more defensive, I think, is really fitting for them. In general, they've got high armor and high shield values as well, but they do, as I said, their unshielded units will have less attack than other factions, which is why the Axemen of the Sarnak, for example, have 8 damage instead of 9. The Swordmasters have 13 instead of 14 damage. And the Elisar's Vanguard, they have quite high attack as well. They would have, again, even higher attack, but because of that malice, they do not. So hopefully you guys have found this useful. Again, it seems like the format is working out for people, but if you guys have any comments or criticism, I'm always open to that. Just let me know down in the comment section, and we can always have a discussion and you know, a bit of a back and forth about what you guys would like to see. But in any case, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. Hope you guys found this useful, and I'll see you next time. Okay, everybody, bye-bye!